Entrepreneurs are naturally optimistic. We start businesses because we see opportunity. We see what something could become. We move fast, make decisions quickly, shake hands, trust people, and often assume that if everyone has good intentions, everything will work out fine. And sometimes it does, until it doesn't. The partnership that started with excitement becomes a dispute. The contract you barely read becomes a problem. The agreement you never put in writing becomes a memory contest. The business name you loved turns out to belong to someone else. The legal details you thought could wait suddenly become very expensive. Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to The Reluctant Entrepreneur. My guest today is Matthew Fornaro, a business attorney and founder of Matthew Fornaro, PA in South Florida. Matthew works with entrepreneurs, startups, and established businesses on the legal issues founders often avoid until they can no longer avoid them. Contracts, business formation, disputes, intellectual property, litigation, and risk management, just to name a few. But this conversation is not just about law, it's about entrepreneurship. Matthew built his own firm, serves business owners every day, and understands the tension between moving fast and building carefully. Today, we're going to break this conversation into two parts. First, we'll talk about Matthew's own entrepreneurial journey, from law firm life to building a practice of his own. Then we'll shift into the practical side, the legal mistakes entrepreneurs make, the documents they should not ignore, and how founders can protect what they're building before a small issue becomes a business-threatening problem. And it all begins right now. Stick around. Hey, Matthew, welcome to the show. I'm looking forward to having this conversation today.
Thank you, Mike. Glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here. Let's start with an icebreaker. What's something that most of your friends or colleagues don't know about you?
Well, Mike, I'm a regular guy. My life's pretty much an open book, so there's not much that I hide from people. Something that casual people who know me may not know is that I love true crime and Lifetime movies.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So Lifetime movies surprises me a little bit.
Yeah.
I watch those
They're
when my
great.
wife
I
wants
love
to watch them.
Lifetime movies. They're all formulaic. There's like 5 different
Totally.
categories they
Yes.
fall in. And they're just great. I love them. They're great. I would love it. I have the Lifetime app. I watch them all the time.
That's awesome.
Yeah, great. Love it.
I used to be, not that many years ago, a huge fan of Law and Order because they didn't drag things out. You didn't have to wait, from episode 1 to episode 10 of the season to get the whodunit. It amazed me how a crime was committed within the first 5 minutes of the show. The investigation took 40 minutes, and the last few minutes was the court trial that ended with an immediate decision and the guy going to jail, or not, mostly go to jail. And how it just worked out that within 60 minutes, you've got from crime to jail cell and tied in a bow, right? And I think that Hollywood's view of trials is very skewed. It's formulaic in a lot of cases, and particularly television versions of courtroom drama, Perry Mason type stuff. And I think that it leaves the perception that if you find yourself on the stand on one side or the other, it'll be quick, it'll be fair, the jury is smart, they'll figure it out, and you'll prevail, and the next day you'll go back to work, and it'll be almost free. I think that's, they don't really portray the gritty side of it. I was sued many, many years ago when I started my company by my former employer and new competitor. And they sued me for 11 causes of action. They lost on all of them. I was found not liable on everything. However, it took a year, and I'm told that that was remarkably fast for a civil case. And it took a year only because we were on this experimental, quote unquote, fast track program that the Superior Court in Orange County, California was doing at the time. I don't think they do that anymore. So, only in the legal world would the term fast track mean a year. It was
Yeah.
deliberately, painfully slow. And then, of course, we had a bench trial because it was a very technical trial. Both of us were scared of juries. And we had to go down a lot of technical rabbit holes. And so it was a bench trial. We both agreed just to have the judge decide. And of course, what I wasn't prepared for was based on my Hollywood experience. I thought, we rest, and the judge would go, not liable or liable.
Yeah.
Instead, the judge says, thank you both sides very much. Thank you, Mr. So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so. I'll send you my determination in the mail. And it took a month. And that was the longest month of my life because I left feeling very confident. I left that courtroom like, it's in the bag. We got it. And we did. But every day up to day 30, I started replaying in my head my testimony, other people's testimony. I was on the stand for 2 days. Was I compelling enough? Did I forget something? Was I credible? Was I not? Did I screw up? Oh my God, what? I don't remember saying this. I don't remember saying that. And I just started questioning myself. And by the time day 30 came, moments before the phone rang from my attorney, I was really questioning whether or not we would win and whether or not I would have a business tomorrow. And the phone rang. I could just tell by the demeanor, by the tone of the voice of my attorney, she was ecstatic. So unless she was a sadist, I won, and I did. But so unlike what we see on TV. The level of intrusiveness, the level of feeling violated, the level of distraction, money, of course, but distraction. For a year, I couldn't work on my business. I was spending every moment defending myself. All of our vendors were deposed. Our customers were deposed. Our customer list was disclosed. I couldn't afford to do any discovery disputes because every time we had a pissing contest for discovery, the judge assigned a special master, which is a practicing attorney or maybe a retired attorney who gets paid about $3,000 per discovery dispute. And I couldn't afford to even fight. So anything they asked for, they got, even if it was competitive. And I hated it. I felt like I was stripped down on a stage and everyone in the audience had a tape measure. That's what it felt like. It was humiliating. It was embarrassing. It was just like awful. And I kind of waved a red flag in front of the bull. When I was sued, I wasn't scared because I didn't know enough to be scared. I was pissed off. So my attitude was, oh yeah, bring it on. Give it your best shot, baby. I'm ready. Bring it on. And that bravado egged him on. And it became a very emotional lawsuit. It wasn't about facts. It wasn't about justice. It wasn't about truth. It was about outspending me so they'd never have a trial. And they almost did. So now I look back and with a whole different, I've been redeemed attitude, like I will do everything in my power to not get sued, which means proactive measures, which means working with someone like yourself ahead of time, because I never, ever want to go through that again. And that was a really difficult year. And 3 years after that, it remained difficult because it took us 2.5 or so years to pay the attorney all the money we owed, which we did, every penny. And she was very gracious to, send what you can, when you can. Every once in a while she'd call. But yeah, I'd never want to go through that again. So that's why this particular episode, I think, is really important for business owners to hear because, there are basically, I'm exaggerating slightly, but there's basically two types of business owners, those that have been sued and those that will be sued. And it's a business, it's a business strategy. And it's very effective if they're suing you in bad faith, particularly. It's very effective to just outspend you. And so I'm glad we're having this conversation. So let's wind back the clock a little bit. You started your
Sure.
career in in a larger law firm or law firms. I think you worked for more than one. Yeah. Before building your own practice, you were doing all that. What was the moment when you realized that you wanted to create something of your own? Why not just stay with the perceived security of working for a firm and getting paid and being able to go home and maybe disconnect a little bit more than you would have if it was your firm? What was there a spark? Was there a moment? Was there a genesis of that decision?
Sure. So it wasn't necessarily just one moment where it was, I'm out the door. It's kind of a culmination of, several years. And what happened was I did commercial litigation representing like big companies, banks, insurance companies. And I had the opportunity, I worked for two AmLaw 200 law firms, really big law firms here in Florida. And I had the opportunity to work for the biggest law firm in Florida and one of the 10 biggest in the United States, doing like a more hybrid version of what I was doing. And like I interviewed for the job, I got the job, and I had like 2 feet out the door ready to go start. And then I kind of started thinking to myself, am I going to, what am I doing? Like, metaphorically, metaphysically, whatever you want to say. Am I going to be one of these guys who, they find dead behind their desk when they're like 70 years old and they're like, well, we gave him a watch. He was a nice guy. Or,
He died doing what he loved. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. He was a
that
nice
eulogy.
guy. He died doing what he loved. He's a great attorney, and we don't know anything more about him. So, I was ready to go do that. And then I'm like, am I just going to be here like 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now where it's like, I've hit a certain echelon or plateau, and it's like, okay, now I'm going to look to go, well, like, where am I going? There's no place bigger I'm going to go, or like, what am I going to do? And, as much as you think you have job security working at a big firm or whatever, you're literally one heartbeat away from being out on the street at any time. Wow. And particularly in a large firm where, attorneys who work at large firms, say there's like a really weird lot of, not even behind the scenes, like kind of in front of the scenes and behind the scenes, like geopolitics, money things where it's like, well, Bob had a bad year in Tampa, so we don't care how much money you made or you hit your billable hours or whatever, you got to make up for Bob. So, so instead of me getting a bonus or whatever, because I did a great job last year, I'm covering some dude who lost a ton of money because he's got no business, no clients or whatever. And, after a few years of that happening over and over again, you're like, well, I think that's kind of the trend here, not just like an isolated incident. And you're like, am I going to do that for the next, 3 decades of my life where I'm going to be here sitting here like at the end of every year, like, well, I did everything, sir. Is that good enough? So that kind of facilitated me thinking, well, I want to go out on my own and start my own law firm because, I'm taking my chances regardless, even if I'm here, in a big firm with quote unquote stable employment or whatever, where, I could be out the door anytime. I might as well keep all the money I make myself. So, or at least have the ability to keep all the money I make on myself and not have Bob take it. So I kind of started thinking about that. And then, I spoke with my wife, spoke with my family. And, I figured, all right, well, I grew up watching like my dad out here in the suburbs, who is a small business owner. And I felt, I saw what he was dealing with, like from a small business perspective, as far as like, I thought he was underserved by professionals because he wasn't big enough to justify having like, people at big law firms who focus on helping businesses like help him. And the same thing with accountants and the same thing with like commercial insurance and bankers. So I'm like, well, why don't I, since I'm going to do whatever, I don't really feel like going to Miami anymore every day or Fort Lauderdale or West Palm Beach. I want to stay out here in the western suburbs. Why don't I focus on helping, small businesses, entrepreneurs, and startups who I think are underserved by professionals, particularly attorneys, because attorneys who are proficient or prevalent in business practice think they're too small because it's only like maybe a 5-figure client as opposed to a 6-figure client or some ridiculous cutoff number. And, whatever. And then at the same time, too, these businesses, these entrepreneurs, whatever, are, not big enough to go to these big law firms. So they deal with like, a local law firm or whatever, who's like a general practitioner who's nice and everything, but that's not really in their wheelhouse because,
Right.
before you walked in talking about your corporate issue or whatever, they were, doing someone's will, or they were doing like a slip and fall or something. And now they're doing whatever. I know that was how it was like with my dad growing up, because his attorney, very nice guy, super nice to me, always been nice to me throughout my career, like but like he's like a general practitioner, and like, helping out the nuances of like a small business wasn't his thing. And I just saw, I thought that he was, my dad was pretty underserved, not by him specifically, but just by in general. And the same thing goes for like, accountants who, you know, like using like grandma's accountant who does her returns for your business, where it's like they're kind of focused on, doing simple individual like W-2 returns and not like complex corporate, returns, doing like 941s and all kinds of. So, I thought, why don't I try focusing on that? Why don't I try focusing, I live in a huge metropolitan area. So, I mean, there's got to be tons of businesses around. So why don't I focus on going out to, where I live, hanging out there, and focus on those businesses that I thought were underserved. And that's kind of how I got into this niche. And that's how I started out. And then obviously starting my own business is a whole nother thing, because, I had no business training whatsoever in my life. I, didn't learn anything in high school about business. I was a political science major in college. I went to law school. They didn't teach you anything about business or how to run a business. And then as a theoretician, and in theory, I knew how to represent big businesses and stuff, but I didn't know how to represent my own business. So these were all things that over the last 11 years I've learned, and I think I'm pretty proficient at. And now I can bring that knowledge to assist my clients, not just from a legal standpoint, but from like a business counselor standpoint. And I also had some pretty good programs that I got involved with that filled in a lot of the gaps. But that's kind of the medium size range story of how I left big law and started my own law firm, and how I picked my niche that I practice in.
I have talked to many entrepreneurs and business owners who graduated business school with an MBA or something, business administration or something like that. And I think, with all due respect to business schools, I don't think they can prepare anyone for starting something from scratch, from bootstrapping a company, because those are like tribal rules of the jungle. They're not best practice, right? You would never want to do that by purchasing a Fortune 500 company and start those tactics. The attributes, I've said this many times on the show, the attributes I started my company with, I knew nothing about business. I had a strong technical acumen, and I'm in the tech industry, so that really helped. And I knew I didn't know anything about business, but I rationalized it. I said, well, I got the hard stuff down. I'm like, you had the hard stuff down. You went to law school. You passed a bar. Okay, so you worked at major firms. Okay, you know everything about the law that you need to know, but nothing about business. And I knew all the tech stuff, and I figured, I remember saying this was 34 years ago. And to this day, I remember saying to myself, well, how hard can business be? Come on, Mike, don't worry about it. You got the hard stuff down. You'll figure it out. It's not, how difficult could it be, Matthew? And boy, deer in the headlights. All my tech skills did nothing to address the numerous business challenges that came my way, that come every business founder's way. And I don't think any business school, as good as they are, graduate with a Harvard degree, I don't think it really prepares you for the, as I said earlier, the tribal survival instincts that are needed to go against all odds. I mean, 80% of all businesses statistically fail. That's just a hard and convenient truth. Thanks, U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. But it's accurate, give or take. And I don't think any formal education teaches you that. I think what teaches you how to run a business is failure and learning and getting back up and learning, most importantly, learning from that failure. But you will fail. As smart as you are, as great of a lawyer as you are, you're going to make some bonehead business mistakes. I made tons of them, and I'm a smart guy. I made tons of them. And it's just part of the curriculum. I think it is its own form of a business school, only there's no brick and mortar buildings, there's no campus, there's no fraternity parties or sorority girls. There's no graduation. It's perpetual learning. But I think you get the equivalent of a PhD if you can survive and learn from the lessons the business gods, as I like to refer to, throw at you along the way. Many people leave corporate world and start a business. That tends to be a very common stepping stone. What was the hardest part for you, maybe that you didn't expect, when you left that corporate environment and went out on your own? Was there any particular challenges that you were met with that maybe you didn't anticipate?
Well, first, the biggest step is that every 2 weeks, money doesn't show up in my bank account.
Yeah, that tends to happen. Yeah. For some reason, when you leave, they stop paying you. Yeah, go figure.
So that's a big shocker because, I can sleep on the couch all day if I want. I'm just not going to make any money. So
right.
The lack of a safety net, obviously, that going in, but I think the realization that there is no safety net and when it happens is not shocking, but I mean, it's like sobering. And I think that was a big thing to get used to, was like, it doesn't matter that I'm smart or I'm a good attorney. Now I have to be good at business. Otherwise, I'm not going to have any money. So that kind of reality is, no matter what profession you're in or what business you're in, I mean, that hits you pretty hard pretty soon to figure out that it doesn't matter if you're the best at what you're doing, unless you're good at business and good at generating business and creating business and doing business, you're gonna, not necessarily maybe fail, but you're not going to succeed like you need to. And you need to figure that out really soon. So that was probably the biggest learning curve, was that it doesn't matter how good you are or what you do, unless you're good at business, you're not going to be good at business.
Yeah, good point. Lawyers specifically are trained to identify risk. While entrepreneurs are often wired to take risk. So there's two different experiences going into entrepreneurship, particularly as a lawyer. How did you balance those two instincts in your own journey to identify risk, probably avoid risk, yet to take a risk? How did you reconcile those two very opposing viewpoints?
Yeah, I think they're opposing, but at the same time, they're kind of, they go hand in hand, because
yes, they do.
Taking good risks is fine, but taking dumb risks is bad. So as an attorney, I can tell you legally and, procedurally and whatever, what dumb risks are in business. Even I knew that even when I started business, like, have a written business plan, pick the correct business organization, have written governing documents, have contracts. That's like risk where if you don't do that, that's just dumb risk of not putting that in place. The actual risk of like, should I invest in this? Should I buy this system? Should I pay for advertising? Should I do that? That's kind of more, acceptable business risk, and not, like a lazy or stupid business risk. So it was kind of balancing knowing what I knew about what not to risk and what to do due diligence on or whatever. And then the risky stuff was like, okay, well, let me see if this, operating system or, the CRM or whatever is the right one for me, or if this advertising or whatever is the right one for me. And, is this the right commercial space for me to lease a space for, and how long should I lease it for? And like the actual, day-to-day operations of the business, not on the compliance side or whatever, but that was the risk that I had to learn to be able to take and, learn as I go of what's, not smart and what's smart as far as good risks are versus dumb risks, which I kind of knew how to avoid to begin with.
Yeah, that's the advantage you had with your background entering business, which is a very legal world. No matter whether you're baking cookies or sending people to Mars, it's a very legal world.
Yeah.
Was there a moment early on in your business where you questioned whether building your own practice was going to work out? Did you ever doubt your decision?
Never really doubted my decision, because I knew, I've seen, being alive and being around, I've seen people who I know were terrible attorneys who somehow succeeded at business. and I knew, I think I'm a good attorney. I think I'm smart, or whatever. Like, if I have that going for me, as long as I can develop the business aspect, like, I think I should be able to succeed. So I didn't really have like, oh, I'm going back to work, or I'm going back to the man, or whatever moment. I've had a lot of frustrating moments as a business owner running my own business, but I never thought about like, oh, honey, I'm going back to the office, or whatever. I didn't tell my wife that or whatever. But I always had a lot of frustrating moments, a lot of, realization moments that it's a lot harder than you think it is. But I never had one where I was like, oh, I'm done moment. But I just had a lot of frustrating moments that, helped me get stronger and persevere through. But like I said, if certain people can make it, I knew I could. So why not me? So that was kind of my mantra and saying. So here I am.
Yeah. Entrepreneurs often delay legal work because they think they'll just deal with it once the business gets bigger. Like, yeah, I know I got to get to that, but right now I got more important things to do, which may be accurate. But what are the risks of that kind of mindset, of delaying what ultimately has to be done to a time when it suits their timing as opposed to when it really should be done?
Yeah, that's a formula for disaster. Whether it's not necessarily short term, but long term, it's guaranteed disaster. And a lot of the issues I deal with my clients, particularly ones who are past the startup phase, who've been around, is that, or and even people who come to me before they start things, is that they're so eager to get into business, and they're so excited, particularly first time business owners or first time entrepreneurs, that they just think that they can step over the due diligence legal portion and sometimes the
Yeah.
tax portion or whatever, and just get up and go and figure it out later on, or deal with the issue later on. And that's a formula for disaster. If you're successful, it's a formula for disaster. And if you are unsuccessful, it's even bigger formula for disaster, because if you don't have, like professionals around you when you start a business, which should be your mindset to begin with, because you don't have to do everything yourself. You can delegate things out and seek advice from people and seek counsel from people. You're going to pick the wrong business organization. You're not going to have a written business plan. You're not going to have written governing documents. And then you're going to be roped into either having an LLC when you should have had an S Corp, or having a C Corp when you should have had an LLC or something. And then later on down the road, you're either going to be successful and you're going to want to sell your business, you're going to want to bring on investors, you're going to borrow money, you're going to do something. And when you go to do it, you don't have anything to show for it. You got no documents, you got nothing. And then you're going to have to go back and fix it. Or on the other side, if, your business fails or whatever, well, you never kept business formalities, you never kept corporate formalities, you never had documents in place. Now you could be individually liable for your business is dead if you're going out of business, or if you get in a dispute with a partner or something, if you didn't have the documents in place. Now it's, like you said in the intro, a memory test. Yeah, all of a sudden everyone's memory is really bad or really good, depending on what your perspective is
Yeah.
regarding what their business relationship was. So the mindset of the entrepreneur, the startup, the founder, whatever, is that when you start up, before you even start, you should consult with not just a business attorney, but an accountant, a banker, a commercial insurance agent. Because if you start off on the wrong foot, you may not fail immediately, or you may not have problems immediately, but down the road, you're going to have, reactive and retrospective things that you're going to have to pay a lot of money and put in a lot of time to correct, that were easily avoidable if you would have done it to begin with. And that needs to be the mindset of people in business, is that it's not, well, that's a luxury I don't have, or that's, unnecessary expenses. It should be part of your mindset, part of your budget, part of your, mantra of doing your business, is that start off on that right foot. Because if you don't, like I just said, if you're successful, it's going to come back and haunt you. And if you're unsuccessful, it's going to come back and haunt you.
That comes back to the old adage used in business and many other environments. I don't have time to do it right, but I'll find time to do it over. Right. So
Yeah.
it's amazing how much pain and distraction we can avoid if we just deal with it for a shorter period of time up front versus repairing it afterwards, because that is expensive and time consuming and risky because you may not be able to repair it afterwards. It's, prevention is a whole lot easier. What's the adage? An ounce of prevention beats a pound of cure. And I think that really applies in the legal world. What are the most common legal mistakes you see new business owners make in the first year or two?
Well, I think it's what I just discussed is probably the biggest one, is that they just skip over all the due diligence and, the startup stuff and just get going and then think that that's all they need to do. And they run into problems later on, and that goes with a little bit of what I was saying of they don't have to do everything themselves, even if they're a solopreneur, even if they're on a lean budget or whatever. I mean, you can, the technology is so good these days, not just AI stuff, but like, mainstream websites, apps, whatever. You can outsource stuff that you couldn't even fathom doing before. Yeah. And you should have that ready to go. I mean, you outsource your accounting, your legal, all that stuff. And a lot of people just still skip over it, whatever, and then it comes back and haunts them afterwards. So it goes back to the whole due diligence startup thing of just they're so eager to get into business, they just start doing business that they don't do the necessary startup, the necessary due diligence, the necessary preparation, and then it comes back to haunt them.
Yeah, in today's business world, the term fractional has found a place. It's not unusual to use a fractional CFO or a fractional CMO or a fractional C-suite person, very narrow expertise. It's become accepted and sometimes even expected. It's a smart move. I don't think the same mentality applies toward legal services, like a fractional in-house counsel, right? They'll just hire you to deal with a specific problem once the problem shows itself, once a subpoena comes in the mail or cease and desist letter or demand for money or something. I'm not aware of too many smaller businesses that use the fractional technique for expert services that consider, working with Matthew. He's our fractional in-house counsel, right? One retainer or a monthly fee or whatever, and you're there when they need you. And I don't know, that was not even on my radar. Now, I became very good friends and colleagues, and partners to many, strategic partners with the attorney I ended up hiring. But that was not the plan. If I had a relationship with her, a business relationship, say a year before, like right when I set up my company, she would have asked me questions, I assume. She would have, I said, I really pissed off my employer. And she probably would have counseled me like, okay, let's do some proactive stuff here. Let's reach out. But instead I fanned the flames. I, waved the red flag. I was pissed. I needed to prove something. And I let my emotions bring that lawsuit to me. I almost invited it. And I think if I had worked with you or the attorney I did work with or some competent attorney that has, a broad level of experience, particularly in litigation matters, they could have probably talked me off the ledge, forced me to swallow some pride, say some things I didn't mean, but say them as sincerely as I can, and avoid the lawsuit to begin with. And that would have saved me years of wasted time. About $150,000, and this was in the early '90s, so that's like bazillion dollars today. It might as well have been a bazillion dollars because I didn't have it. It took up all my startup capital, and it wounded us, which was the plan. But I think that if I had a relationship with an attorney, that I could pick up the phone and go, "Hey, Matthew, I hear some drum beats. What do you suggest?" You would help me. Just like a CFO would help me if the IRS contacted me, or if I wanted to take advantage of some crazy tax scheme, and they're like, "Oh, slow down, buddy. That's a red flag. You're going to end up with an audit." And that's good for people to hear. But we don't. I think in general, business founders, particularly new business founders, don't think of counsel in that same regard as they would think of hiring a plumber to do some proactive work. I'm not sure why, but work on that, Matthew. Work on
Yeah.
maybe come up with a fractional strategy because I've never heard.
Yeah.
I could just be
No,
ignorant, but
there's a lot of attorneys I know who try to do like, general outside counsel, or like, I know one attorney who actually does like tout himself as like fractional, like general
yeah,
counsel or whatever. So
yeah,
it's interesting, but I mean, like, my relationship with my clients is, come to me, like, talk to me, whether you're doing something, not doing something, whatever. Keep in touch. Let me know what's going on. Let me
yeah,
know who your accountant is. Let me know who your banker is, whatever. And, keep me in the loop, not just when things happen or whatever, or when changes happen, but just,
yeah. Because
call me maybe, that kind of thing. Like,
yeah, you can
I'm
spot
here.
a trend. You can see like, ooh, I wouldn't have. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Trust me, don't do that. That's going to lead
Yeah.
to something, or it could lead to
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, but it's weird, Mike, because things apply, and like mentalities and paradigms apply to attorneys, that if you try to apply that to other professionals, I mean, it's silly, and you think someone was crazy. The same thing with like, we could have a whole podcast about AI, like using AI or whatever. You know, I understand. I love AI. I'm a big AI proponent, but obviously the ethical, safe use of AI, make sure you fact check everything before you put it
Yeah,
out there.
100%.
So, but like, people try to use that as a substitute for an attorney. And you wouldn't use that as a substitute to do your taxes, or even more, you know, even more preposterously, but still applicable. If you're sick or whatever, you're not going to go on AI and not go to the doctor and be like, well, AI says, it's a headache. And then, like, you have a tumor or something like
Yeah,
that. Like, but that's cool for attorneys. You can bypass it with AI. But if you apply that to other professions, it's crazy. And that's why the mentality of, not needing an attorney or calling an attorney until you're in the thick of it or there's a disaster, like that's a mindset that a lot of business people have to overcome and have to change, because proactively there's a lot we can prevent, a lot of money and time we can save you.
yeah. I think the analogy would be, use WebMD. This is before AI to
Mm-hmm.
come up with a list of all the possible things that could explain your symptoms, and that will scare you enough to go to the doctor. And I have a good friend of mine, a family member friend of mine actually, who's a general practitioner, a family doc, and he has a small practice, and he just shakes his head when people come in with printouts of WebMD. Now it's probably ChatGPT, but because it just fills up his office with calls that he has to deal with, and of like talking people off the ledge. No, it's not leukemia; it's a skin rash. Whatever.
Yeah. No.
But I can see how that could be irritating when there's all these armchair physicians out there now. There's probably a lot of
Yeah.
armchair attorneys out there now too.
Yeah.
But it could save your life. It could save your business. And it's
Hmm.
probably better that they go in and waste a little of your time and pay you for it than to ignore it. But what are the dangers of relying totally on legal Zoom? I say that as a benchmark, a bookmark. I don't not picking on the company specifically, but you can do estate planning. You could do a trust. You could do all this stuff. You buy the template for $30 and you fill in a few forms and boom, it spits it out for you. I'm sure there's some transactions where that's more than enough, but at what point should they say, okay, I need someone who's, not some app, not some learning module, some chat GPT or Claude or whatever they're using. I really need to have a human eyes on this. It may be right. It may be close to right. It may be completely wrong. But how much are business owners relying on self-help versus self-help balanced with an expert opinion?
Well, they're relying on it as much as they can get away with until they get hung out and caught or whatever.
Yeah.
So, and again, I love AI. I use AI all the time, but I ethically and responsibly use AI, and I take responsibility over it, and I fact check and I legal check it. And I know, I think, what's right and what's wrong from a legal perspective. But my clients don't. They look stuff up on AI or even old fashioned Google or whatever, and they don't know what's right or what's wrong. They just know what answer it gives. And you don't know if it's the correct answer or the incorrect answer. And a lot of businesses just, kind of think, well, the AI says it's right, so I'm going to go with it. And, you know, you don't know what you don't know. And particularly, you don't know what's right or what's wrong. So you just kind of go with it. And then maybe you get away with it. Maybe you get caught. And if you get caught, it's going to be, a huge headache, a huge time bill, a huge money bill. And, I deal every day now where clients send me their AI stuff, to second guess me or to tell me what to do. And I'm fine. I'll never poo poo or, ignore anything you give me to look at. I'll look at anything you send me. I'll gladly look at it. But it may be wrong. A lot of the time it's wrong. Sometimes it's right. It's pretty cool when it's right. But when it's wrong, it's really wrong.
Yeah.
Or it could be really wrong. And, it takes a trained human to tell you if it's right or wrong, or what applies or what doesn't apply, or what's, here or what's there or whatever. And, if you think you're getting away with it and you're not going to pay for it, well, eventually it's going to catch up to you at some point. So, I mean, it's great, but at the same time, you need the human element to tell you what's the correct and incorrect stuff.
Yeah. I'm sure that the terms of use for any of the chat model, any of the AI models, include something, that holds them harmless. There's no malpractice in AI. I mean, some of the larger companies are in court right now because they suggest that some discussion with an AI agent came back with, recommending a kid kill himself or something. I mean, which is tragic, awful, completely awful.
Yeah.
But an AI agent could give me bad legal advice. And if it turns out to be bad and I suffer damages, there's not much I can do. I can't sue Sam Altman because I'm confident that in the terms of use, they're protected from stuff like that. And at the bottom, I think of every service, right below where you type in your query or your prompt, it says, like in the case of ChatGPT can make mistakes. Check everything, be careful.
No.
Imagine if you signed every letter, sincerely, Matthew Fornaro, I can make mistakes, People would question whether they'd pay you to look at anything, right? Because that's your get out of jail free card, so to speak. But we do it all the time with online services. Let's talk about partnerships. I had a business partner when I started my company and regretted it after about 3 months and realized I just brought in the wrong partner. And then it took me some time and money to remedy that. I had to buy him out. Why do so many partnership problems begin with unclear expectations rather than just bad intentions?
Sure, because everyone is friends or family when they go into business, and everyone wants to succeed. Nobody goes into business.
Kumbaya. Yes, exactly.
And then life happens, and business divorces happen. Right before we were on the air, I was a couple minutes late because I was actually dealing with that exact issue with a client who I was meeting with. Business divorce, partnership, quote unquote, at odds with each other, and now they don't have the written documents, and it's chaos. And again, a lot of what I said is not doing the due diligence and having the documents in place. Well, guess what? The rubber hits the road when there's a business divorce, as we call it in the profession, of two people who are in business together, not necessarily traditional partners, but maybe members of an LLC or shareholders in a corporation. When I hate you, you hate me, my spouse hates you, my spouse hates me, like whatever reason, we're at odds with each other. And now we got to unwind our business relationship, whether I buy you out, you buy me out, we sell the company, we liquidate the company, whatever. And if we don't have the documents in place and we didn't plan that at the inception of the business, we're going to have major problems. And it's going to cost us a lot of time and a lot of money, not just business-wise, but personally. And that's part of the mindset of the preparation that's got to go into the business from the inception.
Yeah, very good. What should every entrepreneur understand before signing a contract, even if they don't fully understand the language? What's the minimum they should understand?
That you could be legally bound to whatever's in that contract. So unless you're willing to throw it all away or walk away, you may want to have an attorney review it, or you may want to take time to review it yourself if you're just arbitrarily signing something. Because unless it's a take it or leave it proposition, there's always an ability and an opportunity to review a contract, to negotiate a contract, and to go over a contract.
Yeah, it's funny. I think the average human probably signs thousands of contracts subtly. Like every time you download an app, you click, I agree. And you scroll past. I say you, but I do. I think most people did. Scroll.
I do too, Mike.
40 pages. And my assumption is this contract was written by well-paid, very professional attorneys for Apple or Microsoft or whatever, Intuit, name the app company. And I'm sure it protects them more than me, but it's a $8 app. I'm not going to worry about it too much. And I think that the fact that the everyday person, even if they're not a business owner, agrees to hundreds or maybe thousands of contracts over their lifetime, or terms and conditions, which are really contracts, it desensitizes us to maybe, discern which one is boilerplate, which one is like, I'd be a fool. There's not enough money in the world to pay Matthew to review the latest Netflix terms and conditions, before I watch a movie. I'll just do it because the risk is pretty low. But that also desensitizes me. So at what point should someone say, I'm just not going to click accept on this one? And that's one question. And the other question is how I think a lot of people don't understand. That's their contract. You have to agree. And to get agreement, sometimes you have to negotiate. Sometimes you have to wordsmith it. Sometimes you have to say, I like the spirit of the contract, but this one line here is a red line. I'm not going to. So outside of like Netflix or Apple or whatever, they're not going to rewrite their contract for me. But at what point should someone really take a contract seriously? And how do you convince your clients that, you can go back. You don't have to agree. It takes two parties to agree. So how do you let your clients know that there is a license to do that, even though it might be costly?
Well, it's not even a fine point. I mean, there's certain take it or leave it contracts of adhesion is another term of art that they use, or it's like, it's either you sign it or you don't. There's no negotiating it. So like your Netflix agreement, your app, you signing to get your ticket to go to Disney World, those are things where, even sometimes, like a car lease or something like that or whatever, those are things where you either sign the paper that's in front of you or get up and walk away. There's no in between.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because there's a lot of attorneys I know who try to negotiate that stuff. And I'm just like, what are you doing? It's either their way or you think Netflix wants 4 million contracts that they're going to have to review. But then there's a dichotomy or there's a thing where, okay, well then there's subjective contracts that are specific that can be negotiated that are, specific for your business, like a commercial lease or an employment contract or, your operating agreement or partnership agreement or corporate bylaws or something where they're specifically created for something where there's an opportunity to review, negotiate, opine on what you want and whatever. And then there's other things, like I said, that are boilerplate or, take it or leave it propositions where there's no negotiating it. And I mean, it's kind of, I think most people have enough common sense to figure out which one is which. And, if you don't or consult with your attorney or ask, your accountant if they know an attorney or whatever, ask someone who like, another business owner or whatever, hey, are you able to negotiate your lease? Are you did you negotiate your supply agreement or did you negotiate your terms of service on your website or whatever? And even if you don't want to consult an attorney, ask another business owner, someone in the same area as you, someone who, has a website or something like that. Ask them and they'll be able to tell you, yes, you can. No, I didn't do it. And, obviously the best answer is yes, consult an attorney. But if you don't want to pay or you don't have the ability to or whatever, ask someone else and see what they have to say. But yeah, there's always the opportunity on a bespoke contract, on a subjective contract, on a specific contract to negotiate it and to modify it, redline it, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. IP, intellectual property, is often misunderstood by small business owners and sometimes big business owners. What should founders protect early, especially around names, logos, content, processes, and ideas?
Everything that they want to monetize later on in their business.
Yeah.
So from the inception, just like all the stuff I said, it's got to go in your mindset of the startup. If you're creating a new name, a new logo, a new invention, a new formula for cola or for energy drink, whatever, that's all stuff that, it's intellectual property, main point property. So you want to protect the property because it's an asset of your business. So you want to protect it sooner rather than later so someone doesn't appropriate it and take it from you. So it's the same thing if you apply the mentality to real property, okay? You're going to put a lock on the door to your office. You're not going to leave it unlocked because you don't want people to steal your computer, your furniture, or whatever. And you don't want people to steal your logo, your name, your website, your invention, whatever. So protect it as soon as possible. Otherwise, what are you in business for if you're not protecting your intellectual property?
I hadn't really thought of it that way. We call it IP, intellectual property, but I don't think I've actually considered it in a more literal sense, property. But it is. It is property. It may not be brick and mortar. It may not be something you can hold in your hand, but it's real. It's got value. It's sometimes the reason you're in business, and the only reason you're in business is the concept, the idea, a name. So yeah, I think that's a good lesson. Take all the things that I mentioned, names and processes and contents and ideas and logos and things like that, and consider them as something tangible, worth insuring. And instead of calling your insurance agent insuring your idea, you call an attorney to insure, not like an insurance policy, but to insure, spelled differently with an E instead of an I, that someone else doesn't take that and call it their own. And
Correct.
so I think insurance, however it's spelled, insurance, like an insurance company, or insurance to make sure something doesn't happen to it, is all a reflection of considering it property and protecting the property like you would any other physical property that you have. That's a really good mindset shift.
No, it is because again, it's the whole mindset of applying stuff that you'd apply to a lawyer or to the law to other aspects of life. It sounds preposterous.
Yeah.
Same thing with intellectual property. Like I said, there's a lock on my door. I had to pay money to get the lock changed. I'm not going to save money by not changing the lock and hope someone doesn't steal my stuff.
Yeah.
Same thing with intellectual property.
You've talked about prevention being better than litigation. In the medical community, they kind of got that down. That's in the modern person's psyche now. We have well checks. Insurance companies actually incentivize a lot of their clients to go for a well check once a year. You get a discount off your property, off your insurance policy, if you get preemptive well checks, which means you don't think anything's wrong, but once a year you go for your checkup. And that way they can spot something early, and it's a good move for the insurance company because it could save them millions of dollars. What does a practical legal checkup? What would be a good practical well check for an attorney? What would it look like for a small business owner who wants to sleep better at night?
Well, it goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, where it's, keep in touch with your attorney throughout the year. Like your accountant should be more than a once a year relationship where you give them your taxes and say, do it. Same thing with an attorney. It's more than I've been sued or we started my company, I'll never see you again kind of relationship, where periodically check in with them. Are there updates or are there new things that I should know about, even though I kind of proactively tell my clients that because I have like a newsletter that I send out. But as a business, if you're, if there's a change in your business, consult with your attorney, hopefully before the change happens, obviously after the change happens. If you're moving locations, you're getting a new lease, you're changing, websites, you're hiring people, you're firing people outside the ordinary course of business, you're going to buy, you're going to sell your business, whatever. Before you do it, check in with your attorney and make sure that it's a smart move from a, business, whatever standpoint, from a legal compliance standpoint, and then B, make sure you do it correctly and you conceptually do it correctly before you do it. So you should always be in touch with your attorney. I'm not a crooked cab driver here with my meter rolling, just waiting for Mike to call me up so I can bill him. I'm out here to help you. If you want to call me and just ask me a question real quick, guess what? I'll answer it, and I'm probably not even going to charge you for it. So I think that's how most attorneys are. They'll gladly take your call, your email, and answer your quick question, and just make sure that you're on the right path, and make sure that you don't get into trouble or chaos doesn't ensue.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Last question, Matthew. Let's go back to younger Matthew. You just graduated law school. You got your first job at a law firm. How then did you define success? And how do you define it now?
When I first got my first job at the law firm, I guess success would be defined by the propaganda and the various things that are put in your mind at law school, and being around other law students and being around what you thought were successful attorneys, whatever, of, I guess, working for a big firm and having like an office on the top floor overlooking the ocean, which I did have, by the way. And I think some, maybe that if you're into like civil law, maybe if you're into like personal injury, like, being like a John Morgan type of mogul or something, or if were into like
Picture
criminal
on a
law
billboard, right? I can get you $10 million.
exactly.
Call me.
Yeah,
Injured? Call
exactly.
me. Yeah.
Being on a billboard, or if you're like in the criminal law, maybe being like, I prosecuted a murder defense attorney, or, I got OJ off or something. I don't know. I think that's what I probably thought a successful attorney was when I first graduated law school. And then obviously, 23 years plus into the legal profession, 11 years plus into my own law firm, would be, I would describe it just having the freedom to do what I want when I want. And that's how I would describe being successful, or a successful attorney now, versus what I would have 23 years ago.
Less about the view, less about the accolades, less about the billboards, and probably more about helping people and building your book of business and making an impact. I'm reading that into not just your answer right now, but the answers you've given through for the last hour or so.
It's being free, being free to able to talk to Mike right now, as opposed to having to
make an appointment.
Respond.
Yeah. Talk to my secretary. I got 10 minutes for you. Yeah, make it quick.
Yeah, exactly. As opposed to responding to some lunatic's email or something, or doing whatever. And at the same time, too, from the professional standpoint, helping people, real people, actual entrepreneurs, businesses, whatever, with their real world problems, and hopefully avoiding real world problems and helping them succeed in business. So I think that's more rewarding than just being a cog in the wheel, helping, a multi-billion-dollar company or insurance company, save six figures somewhere. So I think, being able to drive past the business and saying like, oh, I was able to help them, negotiate that lease, or avoid, some kind of franchise issue, or, something like that. That's much more rewarding professionally than it was ever, avoiding a big verdict or getting, a big judgment for like a bank or something.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a more personal touch. You can see the impact a lot more clearly.
Yeah.
Impact's greater. Well, Matthew Fornaro, thank you so much for being my guest. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your expertise. I appreciate the journey you went on. I'm glad you're on this side of the profession, helping people not just giant corporations. I think that's what's driving your business. And for my listeners or viewers who'd like to get more information on Matthew's law firm, I'm not sure how the legalities of in-state, out-of-state work, but we'll just make the information. You can figure it out if whether you can work for someone of another state or if you have to be part of their bar. I know there's weird rules on that. But at any rate, for my listeners or viewers who would like to get more information and the URL, at least, to Matthew's self-named company, Matthew Fornaro, PA. PA stands for Professional something?
Professional Association.
Association. Yeah.
It's a corporation. So
there you go. Yes. Okay. So if you'd like to get more information on Matthew Fornaro Professional Association, if you're watching this on YouTube, look right down here, right below me. It says see more. Click that, and the URL will be right there. If you would like to, if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app and you'd like to get that information, just look at that podcast app's show notes, and that information will be there as well. Matthew, thanks so much, counselor, for we kind of did a Law and Order. We got everything done in one episode. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was great. I figured out who we got a conviction and everything. So it's
exactly.
Good. So thanks.
Wonderful. Now we're off to the next crime to solve. But
I got to
murder and prosecute
after this break. So.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Never a dull moment. Well, thanks again, Matthew. It's great to see you, and continued success in your journey.
All right. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
Okay. Here are some final thoughts. My conversation with Matthew is a reminder that entrepreneurship is not just about ideas, ambition, sales, or growth. It's also about structure. And structure is not the enemy of creativity. It is what helps protect it. Most founders don't ignore legal issues because they're careless. They ignore them because they're busy. They're building the product, finding customers, managing cash flow, hiring people, solving problems, and trying to keep the business alive. Legal work can feel like something that belongs sometime in the future. But as Matthew points out, the future has a way of arriving quickly. The agreement you skipped, the contract you skipped, the ownership conversation you postponed, or the intellectual property you failed to protect can become the very thing that threatens the business you worked so hard to build. The lesson is not that entrepreneurs should become fearful. The lesson is that entrepreneurs should become intentional. Build boldly, but build clearly. Work with people you trust, but don't rely on memory, assumptions, or good intentions to define the relationship. Put the important details in writing so everyone understands the agreement before there's a disagreement. Move quickly, but understand what you're signing. Protect the business before it needs protection. Because sometimes the best way to keep a business moving forward is to take the time to put the right foundation underneath it. Now, that's a wrap. Thanks for being part of our Reluctant Entrepreneur family. We've been very busy recording future episodes with amazing guests, so be sure to subscribe to get notified when new episodes drop. If you're an entrepreneur or know someone who would make a great guest, of course, we'd love to hear from you. Visit reluctantentrepreneur.podcast.com, where you can apply or recommend a guest or just learn more about the show. And don't forget to check out my newest series, Reluctant Lessons When Businesses Go Wrong. On this series, we dig into high-profile business failures and the story behind it all. We've already profiled several companies with more on the way. As it turns out, there's absolutely no shortage. Check out the Reluctant Lessons series on this channel. And if you're interested in my book, The Reluctant Entrepreneur, Anatomy of a Business Startup from Uncertainty to Unstoppable, it's available in paperback and Kindle on Amazon and as an audiobook on both Audible and Amazon. And finally, to everyone listening or watching, if you find yourself stepping into entrepreneurship, whether that was by choice or by circumstance, remember this: sometimes the path we never planned becomes the journey we were meant to take. Thanks so much for being here. I'm out of time. I truly appreciate all of you, and I'll see you again soon.